Where's Tooted? Where's Tooted at? Can we get Tooted? Here go the song. Here go Tooted. Take it, play it, do whatever y'all gonna do with it. Shake. Hey, here go the song. Don't ask me for more.
Yo, something is seriously off. And the deeper you look, the darker it gets. This isn't just another celebrity breakup. This feels calculated, staged, like a story that was never meant to fully come out. Because what if everything you've been told about Cardi B and Stefon Diggs isn't the truth at all? What if the real reason behind their split was buried on purpose? Because now, Megan Thee Stallion is dropping clues, subtle but sharp. Not random lyrics, not harmless shade. This feels targeted, intentional, like someone finally got tired of staying quiet. And here's where it gets disturbing. There's a growing theory that while everything looked normal on the surface, something secret was happening behind the scenes. Quiet link-ups, hidden connections, and one name keeps coming up again and again, Partisan Fontaine. If even part of this is true, then this wasn't just betrayal. This was calculated deception, because the narrative being pushed publicly, it doesn't match what fans are starting to piece together. Some are now saying the blame was redirected, that the Rayall story was flipped, and that someone walked away looking like the victim while hiding something much bigger. And then there's the most unsettling part. Rumors of unseen footage, private moments, receipts that haven't surfaced yet. If those ever come out, this entire situation doesn't just change, it explodes. So the question is, was this a breakup or a cover-up?
No reason. I know. No reason. Yeah.
This wasn't supposed to come out like this. At first, it looked like just another celebrity breakup. Quiet, controlled, almost predictable. No dramatic statements. No messy interviews. Just distant silence and carefully curated posts that told you everything was fine. But behind that silence, something wasn't adding up. Because when Cardi B and Stefon Diggs suddenly went from appearing locked in to completely disconnected, fans noticed the shift immediately. The energy changed. The tone changed. And most importantly, the story didn't make sense. Publicly, it was framed like a typical fallout. Differences, timing, pressure, the usual explanations designed to close the conversation before it even starts. But then, the cracks began to show. Subtle at first. A line here, a lyric there. And that's when Megan Thee Stallion entered the picture. Not directly, not openly, but in a way that felt far more dangerous. Because Megan didn't need to say names. She didn't need interviews. She let the music talk. And what the music suggested was far from innocent.
I want to make it very clear. When I with two people and I like two people, I stay away from their because when it comes to relationships, something always happen. And one thing about me, I'm going to stay neutral and I'm going to stay out of it.
Listeners started picking apart every word, every bar, every pause. Not just hearing the song, but analyzing it. And the more they listened, the more one theory started to dominate the conversation. This wasn't just about heartbreak. This was about betrayal. And not the kind that happens overnight. The kind that builds quietly, behind closed doors. Because according to growing speculation, while everything looked normal between Cardi and Stefon on the surface, something else was happening in the background. Something hidden. Something deliberate. And one name kept resurfacing in these conversations, Partisan Fontaine. Not just any name. Megan's past. Which is exactly what made this theory so explosive. Because if the whispers are even partially true, then this wasn't just a relationship issue. This was a collision of loyalty, friendship, and secrecy. People began connecting timelines. Old interactions. Moments that once seemed harmless, now look different under a new lens. Photos. Studio sessions. Casual mentions.
Business. So stop harassing me, stop calling me a person, stop calling me a because that's not what I am. It is complete, finally.
All being re-examined, reinterpreted, questioned, and suddenly, what once looked like coincidence started to feel intentional. Even more unsettling, the idea that this didn't just happen recently. Some believe this had been going on for a while, quietly, carefully, without drawing attention, which raises a bigger question. Who knew? Because if Megan's lyrics are anything to go by, this wasn't a surprise to her. Not entirely. There's a growing belief that she didn't just discover the situation. She observed it, sat with it, waited, and when the moment was right, she responded. Not with confrontation, but with exposure disguised as art. And that's what makes this situation different. Because there are no direct accusations, no confirmed statements, just patterns, clues, energy shifts, and a narrative that doesn't quite hold together the way it should. Meanwhile, Stefon Diggs remains at the center of a story that may not fully belong to him. Some see him as the one blindsided. Others believe there's more to his side that hasn't surfaced yet. But one thing is clear. The version of events being shown publicly feels incomplete, and in situations like this, what's missing is usually where the truth hides. Because this isn't just about who left who, or who said what. This is about what was happening when no one was looking. And why? It's only starting to come out now. And if part 1 feels unsettling, that's because it should. Because the deeper this goes, the less it looks like coincidence, and the more it starts to look like something carefully hidden. By now, the narrative should have settled. Breakup happens. Statements drop. Fans move on. But that didn't happen here. Instead, the story got quieter, stranger, more controlled. And that's usually the first sign that something bigger is being contained. Because while the public was fed a clean version of events between Cardi B and Stefon Diggs, the internet started building a completely different timeline. One that doesn't rely on statements, but on patterns. And patterns don't lie easily. It started with the smallest details, interactions that stopped overnight, energy that felt forced, appearances that looked more like damage control than reality. Fans noticed that what used to feel natural suddenly felt staged. And then came the deeper dive. Old clips resurfaced. Moments that once seemed harmless now carried weight. People began asking uncomfortable questions. Why did certain connections overlap at very specific times? Why did certain people suddenly go silent at the exact moment things started falling apart? And once again, one name kept circling back into the center of it all. Partisan Fontaine. But this time, it wasn't just speculation. It was timing. Because according to online theories, the alleged connection between Cardi and Partisan didn't just appear out of nowhere. It aligned almost too perfectly with the moment things began to shift between Cardi and Stefon. And when timelines start matching like that, people stop calling it coincidence. They start calling it a pattern. Meanwhile, Megan Thee Stallion remained publicly calm. No direct callouts, no explosive interviews, no names. But the music told a different story. Lines about betrayal, about disloyalty, about someone getting too close to people they shouldn't be near. And listeners didn't just hear it. They felt it. Because there's a difference between writing lyrics and writing from experience. And the tone Megan delivered with, it didn't sound like guessing. It sounded like knowing. Which brings us to the most unsettling part of this entire situation. The idea that this wasn't exposed immediately. Because if Megan was aware or even suspicious, why wait? Why stay silent while everything played out publicly? Some believe the answer is simple. Timing. Because in today's industry, truth doesn't just come out. It's released. Strategically. And if that's the case, then what we're seeing now might not be the beginning of the story. It might be the moment it was chosen to be revealed. But there's another layer people can't ignore. And it involves Stefon Diggs. Because while most of the attention is shifting toward Cardi and these alleged hidden connections, there are whispers that Stefon's side of the story isn't completely clean either. Rumors of outside links. Low-key connections. Names being mentioned quietly, including Young Miami. Nothing confirmed. Nothing solid. But enough to blur the lines. And that's what makes this situation even more complicated. Because now, it's no longer about one person being wrong. It's about a web of overlapping choices, where loyalty becomes questionable on all sides. Still, there's one detail that continues to stand out. The silence. Because in scandals like this, silence isn't always peace. Sometimes, it's strategy. No one is fully denying anything, no one is fully confirming anything. Just enough distance to avoid direct confrontation. Just enough ambiguity to keep people guessing. And while fans debate theories, break down lyrics, and connect dots, the people at the center of it all, they're watching, carefully, because once something is said out loud, there's no taking it back. And maybe that's why everything still feels unfinished. Because the truth, it hasn't fully surfaced yet. Those cracks weren't accidental. They were always there, hidden, until someone finally gave people reason to look closer. At this point, it's no longer just a theory. It's a pattern that refuses to stay buried. Because the more this situation unfolds, the clearer it becomes. This wasn't just a breakup. It was a slow collapse, carefully hidden behind silence, image control, and perfectly timed distractions. And now, people are starting to ask the question no one wanted to say out loud. What exactly was being covered up? Because if you follow the timeline closely, something stands out. Right when connection between Cardi B and Stefon Diggs began to fracture, the noise increased. More posts, more appearances, almost like attention was being redirected on purpose. And in the middle of that noise, the real story stayed quiet, but not invisible, because behind the scenes, the same name kept echoing, Partisan Fontaine. Not loudly, not publicly, but consistently. And consistency is what turns rumors into something harder to ignore. According to ongoing speculation, this wasn't just a one-time overlap. It was repeated, calculated, hidden in plain sight. Moments that looked like coincidence at first now feel placed, intentional. too precise to dismiss. Which brings us back to Megan Thee Stallion. Because if there's one person in this entire situation whose energy hasn't matched the public narrative, it's her. She didn't react the way people expected. No emotional outbursts, no direct accusations, no messy online spirals. Instead, she delivered controlled messages. Through music, through tone, through silence. And sometimes silence says more than exposure ever could. Because when someone knows something, but chooses not to say it directly, it usually means one thing. What they know is bigger than what they're willing to reveal. And that's where the situation takes a darker turn. Because now, there's growing tension around something that hasn't even been confirmed to exist. Alleged footage, private moments, receipts that may or may not be sitting somewhere unseen, unreleased, but very real to the people involved. And if that's true, then this entire situation is sitting on a trigger. Because all it takes is one leak, one post, one wrong move, and everything changes instantly. Reputations shift, narratives collapse, truth replaces speculation, whether anyone is ready for it or not. Meanwhile, Stefon Diggs remains in a position that's becoming harder to define. Was he misled? Was he part of something bigger? Or was he simply placed in the middle of a situation that was already unfolding behind his back? There are no clear answers, only shifting perspectives. And that's what makes this story so dangerous. Because in stories like this, everyone looks right until new information proves them wrong. And everyone looks innocent until the missing piece shows up. But here's the part that no one can ignore anymore. The friendship. Because what once looked like genuine support between Cardi and Megan didn't just fade. It ended. Abruptly. Cold. Without explanation. And friendships don't collapse like that. Without a reason. A real one. Not the public version. The private one. So now, we're left with fragments. Lyrics that feel personal. Timelines that feel intentional. Silence that feels calculated. And a story that still hasn't fully revealed itself. Because if everything we've seen so far is just the surface, then what's underneath might be the part they never wanted anyone to find. And maybe that's why nothing has been confirmed. Because confirmation doesn't just end speculation. It locks the truth in place. And once that happens, there's no rewriting the story, only living with it. And here's where everything stops being speculation and starts feeling like a ticking time bomb. Because if even a fraction of this lines up the way people think it does, then this wasn't just a messy situation. It was a perfectly staged illusion. The kind where the truth doesn't disappear. It just gets buried under better headlines. The silence. That's not peace. That's pressure building. The posts, the distractions, the perfectly timed moves, they don't calm things down, they delay the explosion. And the longer this goes without a clear answer, the louder the questions get. What really happened behind closed doors? Why do the timelines feel too precise to be random? And most importantly, who benefits from keeping the full story hidden? Because right now, everyone is playing a role. Some are speaking without speaking. Others are moving like nothing ever happened. But behind all of that, there's a version of events that hasn't been told yet, and people can feel it. And if those alleged receipts, those unseen moments, ever surface, this entire narrative flips overnight. No spin, no control, no coming back from it. So ask yourself this, are we watching a breakup unfold or a cover-up slowly falling apart in real time? Because once the truth hits the surface, it won't trend for a day. It'll rewrite everything. Drop your theories, your breakdowns, your wildest takes, because this story isn't finished. It's building, and when it finally breaks, everyone involved will feel it.